crisis of democracy seen through the Islamic lens. That's the subject today, and we are prompted to address the subject because of what we see around us in a very gross manner, because we are toying with the term democracy, and from a platform which is supposed to be Islamic, i.e. the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, for instance, as an example, or in the entire Muslim world, democracy is being used as a facade, and understanding democracy from the perspective of Islam has become extremely essential. There has been a back foot approach to implementing the implications of democracy as are manifest in Islam within the Islamic world. The entire approach is apologetic, and therefore this topic needs to be addressed in a form and in a manner that, at least from the legal perspective, from the perspective of sociology in Islam, from the perspective of jurisprudence in Islam, the concept of democracy should be made amply clear. In the Pakistan scenario, for instance, we find where the country has tried, all particular models which have been dished out to them from sources which are other than Islamic, and have completely failed. And we now see that the democratic forces, so to say, as they exist, try and bring about a hype within the population as bastions and protectors and propounders of democracy. Now, democracy as is manifest in Pakistan, for instance, is worse than Russian roulette, because it really does not represent the will of the people. And might I say that democracy in the Western format, as it does exist predominantly, does not represent the will of the people. So all factors of political science which warrant and which necessitate the representation or the establishment of the will of the people have been denied in the Western formula or the Western manifestation of the term democracy. So what does democracy from the Islamic periscope look like? The term shura is the bedrock for democracy as is manifest in Islam. Shura, the term shura, essentially represents consultative decision taking, and therefore this aspect is only achievable through, and I'm going to use a Western term here, a factor of direct democracy. We can see a small example of direct democracy in the Confederation of Helvetia, otherwise called Switzerland. And it does, in essence, represent democracy as is manifest in Islam, because it allows a consultative platform where everybody can participate, does participate, and therefore the will of the people becomes the overriding force for governance. I must add here that politics in any territory, therefore, has to stem from the limitations that exist within this defined factor of, or this defined nature of democracy as has just been explained. Let's move on to governance. When we view governance, basically 2-3 factors are absolutely essential. One is decentralization because of democracy. The other is standardization because of the evolutionary mechanism for material technology. The third is a social contract which enables a taxpayer to audit the performance of the governors. And finally, what is the soul and essence of governance is consensus development. Now, this consensus development is again based upon certain features of the government. The first and the foremost and the most important is the welfare of the population. When we talk of government, we talk of governance. And ironically, we are not talking of governing an ummah. We are talking of governing nation states in this day and age. Nonetheless, the welfare of the people figures first and foremost. That means a political territory, i.e. a nation state, carrying a body of population has to be fed, has to be educated, has to be looked after for healthcare, has to be provided everything that is required for its subsistence. Now, this is a cost. This is not a revenue source. The next thing, which is fundamental to human rights, is the protection of liberties in Islam. We cannot delude ourselves from the fact that this message, the final message, the final divine message, has given human society and the individual liberties which were erstwhile never available to any society that did exist in human history. These liberties are referred to as the exercise of free will. They are contained through limitations, and they also determine the permissive limits for lawmaking. So in Islam, while you have liberties, you also have a hudud. And the hudud, which is limitation, prevents individuals from transgressing into any factor which disturbs peace within a social environment. To give you a crude example of this, if a person wishes to indulge in anything which in Islam is not permissible, i.e. the usage of cigarettes, the usage of tobacco, the usage of alcohol, he's perfectly entitled to do that because he has been given that liberty by the Creator. But it must not affect the social environment. That means his action or her action, her indulgence or his indulgence must not disturb social harmony. Next, comes external security. A factor of governance is essentially based, one of the factors of governance is essentially based on the development, the existence, the presence of a defensive institution that will protect the society, the Islamic society, from aggression, from marauders, from pirates, from essentially any or all form of oppression. In layman terms, this can be referred to the military wing of the government. And finally, is the economic liberties that have been provided in the message of Islam and are incumbent upon any government to free it from all forms of bureaucratic control. A government can be a regulator for standards, but cannot be a regulator for political objectives when it comes to economic autarky. That means, and again in layman terms, that it means that if anybody would like to indulge in trade and commerce and industrialization and entrepreneurship, he or she has the complete liberty to do so without the interference of the government or the bureaucracy that constitutes the government. Now this is an exceptionally beautiful injunction, because it is on the freedom of economic action that depends the well-being of a society. All societies lean on economic vibrance, and the economic vibrance when it is contained, it takes away a fundamental right from citizens. It also supports, proliferates, and induces neocolonialism. Let's take the Pakistan case again. For instance, we take electricity, we take water, we take fuel in any other form, energy. We take aspects of social media, the aspects of communication, the aspects of indulging into activity in outer space, in exploration. These are all economic activities and cannot be subjected to controls from within or without. There is no third country which can come and tell us, you can't do this or you can do this. Similarly, no bureaucrat, no government is entitled to regulate this, to control this or prevent this because of any such restriction. This economy has been following sanctions imposed unilaterally or collectively by external forces that are known to be imperialists. And under Islamic laws, this is abhorrible. It cannot be done. We cannot accept, endorse, condone, or approve of any economic restriction whatsoever that serves the political or economic interest of another. We have to look within, strengthen ourselves, and retain our liberty and freedom when it comes to the economic arm. So when you talk of government based on democracy, then the people, if genuinely voting for an opinion at any given point in time, anywhere in the world, will never agree, endorse, condone, approve restrictions that hurt their economic well-being or their economic growth and interests. Now, after governance, we have to address a very strong judicial structure or setup. In Muslim societies, where the liberties are way beyond the imagination of any other society in existence on the planet, in theory, in the allowing of these liberties, in the allowing of a very strong military setup, in the allowing of an open economic arena, an absolutely non-partisan judiciary has to exist. They are the real muftis of any Muslim society. The edicts of the times gone past are irrelevant. And it is adjudication based on the ethos of justice defined within the dictum of Allah that is pertinent today. That must come from jurists and not from the clergy. To structure an independent judiciary, the footprint must cover every individual in a given territory. First. The second criteria is to have the judiciary to be totally non-partisan. And the third, if we take the Pakistan example again, you don't have judges settling issues. You have judges adjudicating on the scales of justice. That means they are providers of justice, they are not settlers of litigation. So when there are no settlements and it is dispensation of justice in its true essence, then the test of an independent judiciary comes from the strength it carries to be indiscriminate in adjudication. Social, political, economic, or any other validity of individuals or institutions should not interfere when it comes to the question of adjudicating in a judicious way. The Islamic writ against following a fake democratic setup, and why we call it a fake democratic setup is because it is not in consonance with the Islamic injunctions thus far narrated, is foolhardy and nonsensical. In fact, it is it provides a very porous social fabric for political manipulation. And as long as political manipulation will remain in place, the judiciary will remain compromised. Feudalism, bracketed with colonialism, will thrive. More monolithic governments will emerge and remain in office, and the actual right of their employers, the tax-paying people, will always remain compromised. So it is absolutely fundamental that when we talk of democracy, we restrict it to the level which is only consultative. So when we view the broad picture, what are we seeing here? We are seeing a strong judiciary which adjudicates between the governors and the governed. And we are seeing popular opinion from the grassroots levels and coming from a population that is not under any factor of oppression, social, military, economic, or religious. Because Islam does not approve of any form of oppression, any form of subservience, any form of tyranny, which the systems today for the factors of governance have not only promoted, have made it commonplace. It's a given. We agree to it, we accept it. We can move from here and to another paradigm for remedies. Now, when we talk of direct democracy, we will come across an effective regime to come into being, into existence, for the purposes of everybody being able to voice an opinion. It is for this reason that urbanization is very pertinent. Because the people and their opinion, apart from the judiciary, which adjudicates between the governors and the governed, the opinion of the people really determine, in essence, the decision-making process of the government when they figure in the community of nations on the planet. What do we approve of? What we do not approve of? And they actually, in essence, are the energy that keeps governments in place and limit their authority by honoring the popular opinion of the people, honoring the sentiments of the people, honoring the beliefs of the people. So while we address the coverage of the people for their opinions, we have to talk in terms of 100% urbanization. Similarly, when we talk of the protection of social liberties, religious liberties, economic liberties, we have to understand that no nation state in this day and age is free to swim without a declared ideological basis. And that ideology is what contains the judiciary, what contains decision taking by any government, what contains the will and wish of the people. So when you want to establish social justice, we essentially need a social contract where accountability by the taxpayers of the government they have hired is absolutely fundamental. The final point towards remedies that I would like to touch upon is fiscal autarky. Neocolonialism, feudalism, political forces, or so assume political forces, the mock political forces that do exist as a facade, are all in office because of a nation state's dependence on an alien medium of exchange. We have covered this extensively in our previous talks. And it has to be reiterated that unless fiscal dependence is not done away with, on the legal basis of our reverting to our ideology, the establishment of true democracy, the establishment of a true and independent judiciary, the establishment of an independent, effective military arm to protect the population from external aggression will not get established. There are no economic criterias that any society will not achieve if they are given that liberty. It is usually the forces within a nation state that contain this for their own vested economic interests that prevent economic vibrance and which brings about poverty, suffering, and slave culture. In summing up the entire talk, of the crises of democracy through the Islamic lens, I have tried to narrate the causes and the effects and the remedy therefore required. And all that can be said, at least for the country from where we make our case, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, it is time that all factors of social, economic, judicial, military laws that are in denial of the Islamic perspective of democracy be shelved and be done away with. institutions of the state can be as democratic as the basic factors of democracy that cover the entire population. That is my case. Thank you.